Good morning and welcome to ABC News Breakfast on Monday, the 6th of January. I'm Paul Kennedy.
And I'm Beverly O'Connor. These are our top stories today. Controversial Liberal Senator Cory Bernardi hits out on abortion.
Waiting for answers, an autopsy to be held on an Australian mother and daughter who died in Bali.
Yesterday was a hell of a shock. It'd be nice to get decent answers as to what's happened.
A rejuvenated Leighton Hewitt's upset victory over Roger Federer in Brisbane.
You know, playing the best players in the world in finals or tournaments always, it's exciting, and that's why you still play the game.
And Australia's victorious Aisling will be celebrated with a public reception in Sydney. Let's go to other news now. An autopsy will be conducted on an Australian woman and her daughter who died in Bali to try to determine the cause of their deaths. 54-year-old Nolene Bischoff and her 14-year-old daughter Ivana fell ill after eating at a local restaurant. Mrs. Bischoff died on the way to a medical clinic. Her daughter died a short time later. It's suspected the pair may have suffered food poisoning after eating fish.
Police in Melbourne are continuing to investigate an explosion in an apartment that left 3 police officers badly burnt. They were trying to help a man who was threatening suicide when an LP gas explosion ripped through the middle unit. 2 female constables remain in a serious but stable condition. A male sergeant is in a stable condition as well.
Leighton Hewitt is celebrating a stunning tennis comeback after years of injury. He's beaten 17-time Grand Slam champ Roger Federer in the Brisbane International Final. The win is Hewitt's first ATP Tour title since 2010. It puts him back inside the top 50 again ahead of the Australian Open later this month.
The warring parties in South Sudan are due to begin peace talks in Ethiopia to try to end 3 weeks of conflict. Meanwhile, fighting is continuing in South Sudan. A South Sudanese army general has been killed in fighting outside the rebel-held town of Bor. UN officials say hundreds of people have died in the fighting. Thousands have fled their homes.
And violent clashes between opposition activists and police have marred elections in Bangladesh. The polls have now closed, but at least 18 people died in the violence and scores of polling stations were torched. The opposition had boycotted the election, claiming it was illegitimate.
Well, the US Secretary of State is winding up yet another visit to the Middle East as he attempts to broker a peace agreement between Israel and the Palestinians.
The effort has been met by scepticism in the region as the deadline for an interim deal approaches. Middle East correspondent Hayden Cooper reports from Jerusalem.
John Kerry is on a relentless campaign of shuttle diplomacy. This is his 10th trip to the Middle East since becoming Secretary of State. Now, on this visit, he wants to secure what he calls a framework agreement, a document that sets out the basic parameters of what a peace deal might look like. It would address those most crucial of sticking points, like how to divide the city of Jerusalem, what to do with Palestinian refugees and Israeli settlements, and how to guarantee Israel's security. Well, after hours of talks here in Jerusalem and in the West Bank, it seems that that framework agreement remains elusive. All that John Kerry is saying at the moment is what he's said all along, that progress is being made.
I will say that we are working with great intensity, with serious purpose, with a commitment to trying to resolve this conflict that has gone on for many years too long, and which I think presents us now with the possibility of trying to find a framework agreement which would really lay out the end game and lay out the framework for the major issues to guide the negotiations from this point forward.
In recent weeks, the most pessimistic man in the process has been the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. He's insisting on an Israeli security presence on the West Bank border with Jordan as part of any deal. And after today's weekly cabinet meeting, he continued the theme.
The Palestinians continue to resist, first and foremost, to a recognition of the Jewish state. We face it in our talks with Secretary of State John Kerry. Serious, comprehensive, fraught talks, during which this issue arises as well as other core issues, on top of which is obviously Israel's security that must remain in Israel's hands.
We're working hard to achieve an agreement on all core issues. No one benefits more from the success of Secretary Kerry's efforts than Palestinians, and no one stands to lose more of failure than Palestinians.
John Kerry has flown onto Jordan and Saudi Arabia to brief Arab leaders on the peace talks. The deadline, at least for an interim deal, looms in late April. Here in the Middle East, there's little expectation that that can be met.
In the early morning, Perth City was barely visible through a thick haze of smoke. It drifted from a large bushfire more than 400 kilometres south of Perth and travelled as far north as Geraldton in the Midwest, 1,000 kilometres from the blaze.
Because you've got a wide front of smoke, when the southeasterly wind came in, that's just pushed all that volume of smoke across the southwest, a large part of the southwest.
The fire started 2 days ago in bushland near Denmark on the state's south coast and has burned through 13,000 hectares of bush in the Mount Roe National Park.
There is some private property and some blue gum plantations that may be under threat in some areas, but we're hopeful of protecting those.
Fire crews believe the blaze may have been deliberately lit and have handed the case to the police arson squad to investigate the cause. Authorities are hoping strong easterly winds forecast for this evening will clear most of the haze covering Perth and the southwest by morning.
We're expecting southeasterly winds as opposed to southwesterly winds we had late yesterday. So any smoke that's transported off the fire now is expected to pass to the south of Perth.
But until it clears, people with respiratory conditions are advised to stay indoors.
It's an irritant, so if you do have an existing condition, it will make it harder for you, so you will need to just manage it. So it's really that things will just be that little bit more difficult when you get a heavy smoke haze. So it's just another... It makes your risk levels a little higher just for the time being.
The health department says the haze did not reach extreme levels and it's had no reports of people needing medical treatment. Catherine Diss, ABC News.
Here we are, now to the front pages of the Monday newspapers, dominated, of course, by Australia's clean sweep of the Ashes, remarkably.
Yes, the Courier Mail has crowned the Australians the Kings of England after humiliating their opponents with an early win in the final test. All the headline makers this morning are trying to come up with that one that just resonates.
Sums it all up, just the stunning victory. The Daily Telegraph goes further to declare Michael Clarke's team legends, a word overused sometimes in my book.
And some nice pictures there. The Advertiser says Australia's dominance was remarkable given the team was comprehensively beaten in England just months ago. The Untouchables,
That's a good one. That's a terrific one. The Sydney Morning Herald also reports on Australia's crushing win with a simple statement, how sweet it is.
The Canberra Times says the sea of pink in Sydney matched the blushing faces of England's cricket team.
The Australian says the selectors struck the right balance with the unchangeables, keeping the same 11 players in each test and achieving a result that nobody had anticipated.
In other stories, a Financial Review says the ACCC is calling for the privatisation of government assets, including Australia Post and Medibank Private.
The Herald Sun reports on that Melbourne gas explosion and says a firefighter saved 3 police officers despite suffering serious facial burns.
The Age says the Essendon supplements scandal has sparked a spike in demand for hormones and peptides.
The Guardian Australia has more on that US icebreaker, which is making its way to another 2 stricken ships stuck in the Antarctic ice.
In the Mercury, Tasmanian tourism operators hope the return of the West Coast Wilderness Railway will deliver a boost to the region.
And the Northern Territory News reports on a Darwin tour operator who narrowly avoided becoming a crocodile's lunch.
We felt that gusty wind. We've had winds of around 113 kilometres an hour and also 106 currently at Cape Grim. Now, what's happening is there's a complex low-pressure system that's pushing to the south of the state, and that is bringing these damaging winds. A severe warning is current across a large portion of the state, and we're looking at those wind gusts to continue until early this afternoon. And in Queensland, there is still a very warm and unstable air mass to the east of a trough, and this is producing very, very warm winds across the top end. We're also seeing storms, and again across the Kimberley. Another trough is sending very warm winds along the west coast. In Queensland today, and you have a severe fire warning across the Western District and the Darling Downs and Granite Belt. Brisbane heading for 33 degrees. Down in the southeast, we are likely to see thunderstorms that could be severe. We've also got very hot temperatures over in the west, 43 degrees in Longreach and also in Winton. For New South Wales, it will be a mostly sunny day apart from isolated showers on the far north coast, and there is also the chance of an afternoon thunderstorm. Sydney, 26 degrees. In Victoria, the front has left a pool of cooler air across the state, but it will heat up again by midweek. Isolated showers in the south today, contracting to the coast by tonight, and strong winds along the coastline. Strong and gusty west to southwesterly winds across Tasmania. A top of 16 degrees in Hobart. The winds will gradually ease from this afternoon, and rain especially in the west with isolated thunderstorms easing this afternoon. South Australia mostly fine day apart from a light shower over the Mount Lofty ranges and also the lower southeast. Moderate southwest to southeasterly winds. And for the west coast, the temperatures are back up. Hot and sunny in Perth, heading for a top of 39 degrees ahead of a south-southwesterly change late this afternoon. A total fire ban across the East Pilbara, and rain and thunderstorms continuing across the Kimberley and also the top end, particularly about the west coast. It will be windy in the south as Alice Springs heads for a top of 33 degrees. Tomorrow, humid but cooler in Perth, heading for 29. A fine day in Adelaide, 26, and still windy for Alice Springs, heading for 33 degrees.